currently Earth.
It was April 19th in the year 1824 that George Gordon Byron, 6 Baron Byron, continues his eternity in what is now Greece, where he had traveled to support the Greek struggle for independence from Turkey. Even today, he is considered a Greek national hero. Byron's scandalous history, exotic travels, and flamboyant life made such an impression on the world that the term Byronic was coined to mean romantic, arrogant, dark, and cynical. Byron was born in Aberdeen, Scotland in 1788. His clubfoot and his impoverished environment made his childhood difficult, but at age 10, he inherited his great-uncle's title. He attended Harrow, then Trinity College, Cambridge, where he ran up enormous debts and pursued passionate relationships with women and men. His first published volume of poetry, Hours of Idleness, in 1807, was savaged by critics, especially in Scotland. And his second published work, English Bards and Scottish Reviewers, in 1809, attacked the English literary establishment. After getting his master's degree in 1809, he traveled in Portugal, Spain, and the Near East for 2 years. His experiences fed into his later works, including Childe Harold's Pilgrimage in 1812, which brought him almost instant acclaim in England. As he said at the time, he, quote, awoke one morning and found myself famous, unquote. His poetry, manners, fashion, and taste were widely imitated. In 1815, he married Anne Isabella Milbank, and the couple had a daughter, Auguste Ada, the following year. Ada proved to be a mathematical prodigy and is considered by some to be the first computer programmer, thanks to her work on Charles Babbage's computing machine. The marriage quickly foundered, and the couple legally separated. By this time, scandal had broken out over Byron's suspected incest with his half-sister, Augusta Lee, and he was ostracized from society and forced to flee England in 1816. Byron ended up settling in Geneva near Percy Bysshe Shelley and his wife, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. There he became intimately involved with Mary's half-sister, Claire Claremont, who bore his daughter Allegra in January of 1817. Byron moved to Venice that year and entered a period of wild debauchery. In 1819, he began an affair with the Countess Teresa Guiccioli, the young wife of an elderly count, and the two remained attached for many years. Byron, always an avid supporter of liberal causes and national independence, supported the Greek War for Independence. He joined the cause in Greece, training troops in the town of Missolonghi, Greece, where he continued his eternity just after his 36th birthday. It was April 19th in the year 1876 that a Wichita, Kansas commission votes not to rehire policeman Wyatt Earp after he beats up a candidate for county sheriff. Born in 1848, Wyatt was one of the 5 Earp brothers, some of whom became famous for their participation in the shootout at the OK Corral in 1881. Before moving to Tombstone in 1879, however, Wyatt had already become a controversial figure. For much of his life, he worked in law enforcement, but his own allegiance to the rule of law was conditional at best. In 1870, residents of Lamar, Missouri elected Wyatt town constable. He did a good job as constable, but within a year, his wife continued her eternity of typhoid, and he began wondering about the West. Not long after, Wyatt was arrested for stealing horses in Indian Territory, and he fled to Kansas to escape prosecution. In 1873, Wyatt joined his older brother James in Wichita, Kansas, the rowdy cattle town that was the northern terminus of the Chisholm Trail. Wyatt once again pinned on a badge. At first, it appears that he worked for a private security force employed by local saloons and businesses to keep order, but Wichita Marshal Michael Meager hired him as an official city policeman by 1875. Wyatt soon proved to be a daunting police officer. He knew how to use his Remington pistol, and he kept his skills sharp with frequent sessions of target practice. However, Wyatt also liked the Remington because it had a strap that made it an effective club. Whenever possible, he preferred to pistol whip his opponents rather than shoot them. He was also a formidable fist fighter. His friend and fellow law officer, Bat Masterson, later recalled that, quote, "There were few men in the West who could whip Earp in a rough and tumble fight," unquote. During the next year, Wyatt again proved his mettle as a law officer, but his political skills were less refined. In April, Wichita held an election for city marshal. An opponent named William Smith challenged Wyatt's boss, Michael Meagher, for the office. On April 2nd, Smith made several disparaging remarks about Meagher, and Wyatt took offense. Wyatt confronted Smith and beat him in a fistfight. Although Meagher won re-election, he was unable to save Wyatt's job. On this day in 1876, a Wichita commission decided that Wyatt's violent behavior was unacceptable and did not rehire him as a police officer. As the town newspaper conceded, quote, "It is but justice to Earp to say he has made an excellent officer," unquote. But the young lawman had to learn to control his passions and play the political game. After losing his job in Wichita, Wyatt immediately moved to Dodge City. He found work there on the police force. A few years later, he joined several of his brothers in the booming mining town of Tombstone, Arizona. Unfortunately, wherever Wyatt traveled, trouble seemed to follow. In 1881, the controversial gun battle at the OK Corral again raised questions about Wyatt's fidelity to the rule of law. Many claim Wyatt helped kill Billy Clanton and Tom and Frank McGlory at the OK Corral, not for legitimate law enforcement reasons, but because of a personal feud between the Earp brothers and the Clanton-McGlory clans. Although exonerated by a local justice of the peace, Wyatt was soon after involved in several other questionable murders, and he was eventually forced to flee Tombstone. Wyatt Earp seemed unable to control his passions or play the political game, though his propensity for solving problems with bloodshed waned as he grew older. He spent the next 5 decades of a long and interesting life wandering around the West, dabbling in mostly unsuccessful business ventures in gold, silver, and oil. He eventually settled in Los Angeles, where he continued his attorney in 1929 at the age of 80. It was April 19th in the year 1897 that John J Mcdermott of New York won the first Boston Marathon with a time of 2:55:10. The Boston Marathon was the brainchild of Boston Athletic Association member and inaugural U.S. Olympic team manager John Graham, who was inspired by the marathon at the first modern Olympic Games in Athens in 1896. With the assistance of Boston businessman Herbert H. Holton, various routes were considered before a measured distance of 24.5 miles from the Irvington Oval in Boston to Metcalf's Mill in Ashton was eventually selected. 15 runners started the race, but only 10 made it to the finish line. John J. Mcdermott, representing the Pastime Athletic Club of New York City, took the lead from Harvard athlete Dick Grant over the hills in Newton. Although he walked several times during the final miles, McDermott still won by a comfortable 6 minutes, 52 seconds. McDermott had won the only other marathon on U.S. soil the previous October in New York. The marathon's distance was changed in 1908 in accordance with Olympic standards to its current length of 26 miles, 385 yards. The Boston Marathon was originally held on Patriots' Day, April 19th, a regional holiday that commemorates the beginning of the Revolutionary War. In years when the 19th fell on a Sunday, the race was held the following Monday. In 1969, Patriots' Day was officially moved to the third Monday in April, and the race has been held on that Monday ever since. Women were not allowed to enter the Boston race officially until 1972, but Roberta Bobby Gibb couldn't wait. In 1966, she became the first woman to run the entire Boston Marathon. but she had to hide in the bushes near the start until the race began. In 1967, Catherine Schweitzer, who had registered as KV Schweitzer, was the first woman to run with a race number. Schweitzer finished even though officials tried to physically remove her from the race after she was identified as a woman. In the fall of 1971, the Amateur Athletics Union permitted its sanctioned marathons, including Boston, to allow female entry. Nina Kuchik became the first official female participant to win the Boston Marathon in 1972. 7 other women started and finished that race. In 1975, the Boston Marathon became the first major marathon to include a wheelchair division competition. Bob Hall won it in 2 hours, 58 minutes. The Boston Marathon was the scene of a 2013 terrorist attack that continued the eternity of 3 spectators and wounded more than 260 others. The historic information divulged on this audio file can be verified on history.com.